Assembly?
Well, I'll get to that.
Oh.
So a lot of people were really annoyed about that. And one of them was Gordon Campbell, who said, boy, if I ever get to be the Prime Minister, we're going to have Citizens' Assembly, and we're going to let the people decide what our voting system should be. So the next election, the Liberals get 58% of the votes and win 77 seats out of 79, which got the NDP all upset. So, and not to mention the Green Party, 12% no votes. But Gordon Campbell, and of course, the Liberal Party starts saying to Gordon Campbell, no, don't hold on. We don't need a Citizens' Assembly. But he did follow through on that promise, and they convened a Citizens' Assembly. What's a Citizens' Assembly? They set up a really remarkably wonderful process. They chose a man and a woman at random from the voters' lists from each riding, 89 or 79 ridings, whatever. So they had like 160 people in this assembly, and and these people were chosen by literally drawing names out of a hat. They were ordinary citizens. None of them were affiliated with political parties. They spent almost a year learning about voting systems around the world and thinking about it, designing a new system. They actually designed a mixed member proportional system, and they designed a single transferable vote system for British Columbia. And then they picked one. They chose the single transferable vote system, and they had a referendum. And that was part of the deal. If they recommend a change, there will be a referendum. And so they had a referendum in British Columbia on whether they should change to the single transferable vote system. And it was a great victory for democracy. We told people, said, you need 60%, that's it. You need 60% to change the voting system. Stop. But then when it turned out they got 58%, well, let's put the government in a very awkward situation. Well, they didn't win, but they did lose, so what are we going to do about that? So they said, well, do it over. Yeah. So this past fall, in 2009, they reran the same referendum, same question. Unfortunately, by this time, it's been a long time since we had those wrong way elections, and people sort of, also the opposition sort of woke up and said, hey, and the NDP is in the position of thinking, wait a minute, maybe we'll get the 40% of the votes, the 60% of the seats, and so on. So the political parties were all against it, and the referendum, and the campaign of fear and loathing obtained, and the referendum lost badly. Now, in between those things, what happened here in Ontario, Dalton McGuinty was running, and he was in 2003, he was in a position where he's saying, well, the Liberals have been in power for 5 years out of the last 60. See, politicians are always in favor of changing the voting system when they're in opposition. So Dalton McGuinty, with the little prodding from Fairview, Canada, said, if I'm ever the Premier of Ontario, we're going to have a Citizens' Assembly too. And so, sure enough, in the election, Dalton McGuinty got 47% of the votes and 60% of the seats, and majority government, and all his party said, whoa, the system's working great. But he did follow through in that promises, and we had a Citizens' Assembly in Ontario. Similar process, slightly different. We got more ridings in Ontario, so what they did is okay, we'll take a man from this riding and a woman from that one, and a man and a woman. Both of these Citizens' Assemblies were 50% women, 50% men, and they were also like balanced for age as well. Like they did that much filtering. And when you do that, inevitably you get really good ethnic balance as well. And the process itself of the Citizens' Assembly was amazing, and I spent a lot of time watching, because it took place up at York University here. So going to the sessions and watching them do it, it was breathtaking. It was a really wonderful process. Unfortunately, it was wonderful right up to the point where they had the referendum, because again, this is where the wheels fell off. Once again, the government decided, no, I need 60%, and they also went out of their way to quash this. Like, they really just, we're not talking about this. And they made sure that nobody knew about it. And it's, in B.C., when the Citizens' Assembly came up with their final report, it went to every household of the province, right? Here they decided, no, that's partisan material. So they got Elections Ontario to run the referendum campaign, and they're impartial, but their idea of impartial is, sorry, we can't discuss it. So they organized all these information sessions, and people would come and say, well, how does this work? And I say, sorry, we can't discuss it. It's truly bizarre. So anyway, we had a referendum here in 2007. Our Citizens Assembly chose a different system. They chose the mixed member proportional system. It's quite a nice little system. It was a miracle of compromise. And there's 1,000 compromises to make. And the trouble with that is as soon as you got something specific, you've got something that you can take shots at. Anyway, the referendum lost badly. There was another referendum in Prince Edward Island where the problem is you've got like 27 members in the legislature, and typically, sometimes one party wins all 27 seats. That happened in New Brunswick one time, too. One party won every seat in the legislature, had to appoint its own backbenchers to be the opposition. There was one election piece in PEI where they had 26 Liberals and a Conservative, or the other way around, because then it'll flop, right? Go the other way. And the guy who was the opposition got sick one week, and sure. Another question, John.
Didn't the Ontario one? Wasn't there a fudge factor in it though? It didn't all come from all the votes. You had to put a backroom fudge factor in. That wasn't it one of the problems?
I don't know what you mean by that.
Well, I was at a meeting where they explained it all, but they couldn't explain. You couldn't get all the votes, all the seats done without some little jug or somewhere, which is what I call fudge factor. I don't know what it was, but it didn't pull out all the seats from all the votes that were done. So they had somewhere in the Ontario one that they had to do a little adjusting that could be done by anybody in favour of anything, and that screwed it up. And that was one of the people who was working on it. I got that from a presentation to a Liberal Party meeting, So
yeah,
you don't know about that particularly.
What you're talking about there, Sharon.
Yeah, the Ontario one, because I spent a lot of time working on that, and the Citizens Assembly process was fantastic. People that were maybe nurses or ambulance drivers, teachers, so a whole mixture, just what society looks like. And they were given not a lot of time. It was all towards the end of the last year before the election was going to be called, so the last year of a 4-year term, that he allowed the Citizens Assembly to go forward. So even when they finished and made their decision, boy, there wasn't a lot of time left. And again, that's when McGuinty said, okay, Citizens Assembly, you know all about it, you know the system's inside out, you'd be perfect for teaching it, you're fired. And then he took it to the Elections Ontario, and I think paid them more to do that than what the whole Citizens Assembly cost, wasn't it? It was a very high ticket anyway. And Elections Ontario were not allowed to talk about it. So people would ask questions and they couldn't compare. You're not allowed to do that.
They would hold these information sessions, and they would literally have a big mock-up of the ballot. They would say, there's going to be a referendum, this is what the ballot looks like. I can't talk about it. And then it would leave. The so-called information would leave, leaving the people who come to find out arguing with each other. But what the? So, and the process was rushed. They had 8 months instead of a whole year to discuss it. And then the referendum campaign itself was very short and basically happened over the summer. 2 weeks before the referendum, most people didn't know. I was working, I was a district returning officer, and the thing you heard the most of was, what is this? Most people, a lot of people, the first time they found out about referendum was when they were handed a ballot. I said, what the hell was this? And, I didn't know what it was, so I voted against it. In Switzerland, for example, they do a lot of referendums. They still do a lot of direct democracy. And they take a minimum of 2 years for a referendum